Welcome to the HMO Property Show. By investors, for investors. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing. Whether you're a seasoned investor, a new landlord, or just curious about property investing, this is the podcast for you. Sponsored by the Co-Living Collective, your trusted partner in creating vibrant and sustainable shared living experiences. Visit us at colivingcollective.com.au to learn more.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. Today I've got a very special guest who has been developing property for 39 years now. He's been through 6 property cycles and he's done over $1 billion in development and mentored over 3,000 students. Today I've got Mr. Bob Andersen on the podcast. Bob, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Oh, mate, great to be here. Thanks very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. I feel like I've got property development royalty on the podcast today.
No, nothing like that. You've been in property development for 40 years, but you've been through plenty of scraps. And, I think it's a humbling experience, actually, to be a property developer for as long as I've been and survive pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't know ego problems on this end, I can tell you. Seen it all and been through it all.
There's a lot of experience that's been gained over them 39 years as well, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, I've seen a few changes in that time for sure.
Yeah.
But, I'm still here.
It's good. That's good, mate. I think a lot of people, when they see somebody who's had a career like yours, they always want to find out, like, how did it start? So if you can take us back to the very first project that you ever did, we'd like to know why did you choose it? What was it? And what made you step away from what you were doing into property development?
Yeah. So my moment of truth came when I was in a pretty serious car accident. I was coming home for my mate's 21st at 4:15 in the morning. Strange enough, I was quite sober, but I fell asleep, hit a bridge, and that put me out for 12 to 15 months. Operations, crutches, all that. Beautiful thing is, it gave me time to think about my life, because I was living life in the fast lane, 3 cash businesses, young guy. I think you're going to live forever. It's a bit sobering when that is. And after feeling sorry for myself for a couple of months, I really started to think about my life, where I was going. Probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I sure didn't think about it at the time.
The weird way.
Yeah. And I thought, well, okay, what am I going to do when I'm back on my literally? And property was always sort of a bit of an interest on the fringe, but I never did anything. I thought, okay, how do you make money in property? Let's have a look. I looked at the share market, knew nothing about that. What about property? That's solid. My parents, who only had their own property in their life, the one they didn't. I remember my mum used to always say, "Oh, real estate, it's solid. It's it's dirt, it's earth, it's solid stuff." And so I had a look around. Well, who makes money in property? And look at real estate agents. Sometimes they do. That can be pretty up and down. Builders, well, maybe. I talked to a builder mate, and then property developers sort of came up, and that interested me. And so I thought, okay, when I'm back on my legs, I'm going to become a property developer. Not having a clue. So I was living in Brisbane at the time, and I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll move to the Gold Coast. I wanted to leave Brisbane, and because after my car accident, I had to go home and live with mum and dad. And I was on sickness benefits, couldn't work, I thought, okay, heading to the Gold Coast, because that's where everybody goes to make their fortune. I didn't realise that people go there to lose their fortune, although not intentionally. It can be a pretty up and down hot market. It has quite a bit in the last, 40 odd years. But went down there, and I thought, well, property developer, where do you go? I started to do a valuation course, which back in the day was at TAFE. That really bored me to death. But at the same time, I got a job with a real estate agent, looked around, and I thought, well, look, sometimes you don't have a direct path in life. As long as you've got a goal, how do you get there? Well, it can be a twist and turn and a few detours, a few speed bumps. And so I joined a real estate company whose primary job at the back of the Gold Coast in those days was selling land estates. And so I joined them, and I discovered that I could actually sell. The only thing I'd sold up to that time was probably a motorbike, a boat, and a couple of dodgy cars. So here selling real estate, I was really enjoying it. I suddenly found that I could sell. And I thought, well, I'm on my way to being a property developer. And because selling land is, so I got to talk to the developers of the land estates and, asking them about, well, when's the next stage being released and, different things. And one of them took me under his wing a bit. So I started to learn a bit more about, developers and what they do. And also got to know the civil engineer and the surveyor that were involved in that, learned a little bit there. And that was good. But the big day for me was when I was sitting in the real estate office one day. It was a Sunday morning. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I thought I would come in a couple of weeks earlier, and he'd actually bought a property off us about 6 months. And he came back in a couple of weeks before this day. This was a watershed day for me, and he'd gotten an approval to subdivide this parcel of land into 4 lots. But then he came in to sell it, so he was approval. And about 2 weeks after he came in, and the way real estate offices worked, I was on this particular Sunday, so I got first crack at anyone who came through the door. First phone call, first conversation, and he came in and he sat down beside me. How's it going? You got a buyer here. His name was Tony. Still remember Tony. He's a pretty cool looking dude. I think he had some Italian in him, slightly long hair, really swarthy, pretty smooth looking dude, drove a good car, everything that I'd like to be at the time. And he said, have you got a buyer for my land yet? And I said, look, Tony, I haven't. I said, look, we're trying. And I said something that's changed my life. I said, I'd love to develop that site that you got, but I just don't have enough money to buy it. And that tricked his imagination. So he pulled up his chair and he started talking to me. Wanted to know how come I wanted to be a developer. Why was I selling real estate? Asked me all sorts of personal things about life and the patch, to all sorts of things. I thought, geez, this is a funny conversation, but it was Sunday morning, not much happening, so I was happy to talk. After about 20, 30 minutes, he said, I'll tell you something about property. He said, Murray, at least your worries. He said, so I said, I like you. He said, I like what you're up to, what you want to do. He said, I'll actually help you develop that site. And I said, I'm not sure if you heard me at the beginning, Tony. They have enough money, love to buy it. I said, I just can't do it. And he reiterated, mate, money's not the issue with this. And so that became what often we would call a vendor type deal. So I signed a contract to purchase the property off Tony, and he agreed to leave half the purchase price in the deal as a loan. And he even took me to his bank, and the bank lent me 80% of what I needed to do the project. So I paid 50% to Tony. I had 30% left over, which covered the costs of this 4-lot subdivision. And then at the end of it, I sold the 4 lots, paid the bank back, paid Tony back the money I owed him plus an interest rate, and walked away with a profit. And I hadn't spent 5 cents. But how long's this been going on? All of a sudden, I'm young and excited and foot tall and bulletproof, and I thought, geez, I'll be retired by the time I'm 30. That's a bit naive I was. Anyway, that's a story, and there's a longer version of that, but I won't bore you with it. But that's how I got into it.
So your first project in property development was vendor finance, no money down deal, dealing direct with the seller as well.
Yeah. The thing is, like a lot of property developers and younger people learn how to do that type of deal, and we teach people how to do that. That's one of a whole heap of what I call creative strategies that you can do. But I didn't know about it. I didn't know what it was called, and I didn't know how to do it. The boot's on the other foot. I mean, normally as a developer, we might try and do one of those deals because it's a deal with little or no money. But the boot was on the other foot. Tony actually showed me how to do it. And the reason he did, and I didn't realise it, he was quite experienced in property. Now, this is down at the Gold Coast. This is at the back of the Gold Coast, a place called Munchaubar. That's where it was. Tony was a bit of a high flyer at the time, and he used to amalgamate development sites along the strip, particularly Broadbeach, Surfers Paradise and Main Beach. And that's where all the big high-rises were going up along the beach. And he used to act as a consultant to a lot of the big developers at the time, and using things like call options and stage settlements and all sorts of things that have come to learn later. He was quite sophisticated. And that's why he showed me how to do it. So the boot's on the foot. But I did ask him once, I said, Tony, why did you take pity on me? And it put me in that position. And he said, Bob, he said, you probably wonder why I talk so much to you before I made that offer. And he said, I wanted to know a lot more about you. And I wanted to see if you actually will be able to do that and give you a big leg up. He said that the more I spoke to you, the more I realised that you were, he said, I was looking in maybe 15 years earlier, a young guy, 10 foot tall, bulletproof, or so he thought, almost embarrassingly lacking of knowledge, but would tackle anything. Like in boxing parlance, he said, you didn't say this at the time, but, today I could say you take on Anthony Joshua, so, and he said that's why it started. And he said that we didn't use the term back then, pay it forward. That'd be known later on. But that's what he actually did, because 15 years earlier, what he gave him a leg up. A Jewish businessman gave him a leg up into property, and he was very, it's like a pay when he saw me. So it's quite an interesting story, that.
Yeah.
And that's what got me, set me up. It was a watershed moment, that sentence. I still remember, I said, Tony, I'd love to do that development, but I don't have enough money. And Tony showed me how I could development, not having enough money. I had a bit, but not a lot. And that became a watershed moment. Would I become a property developer? Yeah, probably would have. I was determined, but might not have been that sort of deal. I might have felt like I had to save up more money. Who knows? It would have happened, but probably slower. And thank goodness for Tony.
Yeah, there's two things that stand out for me there, Bob. In the early days, as a real estate agent, you were around developers asking the right questions as well. And I always say proximity is power. Being around the right people, and even if you're not asking the questions but absorbing what's going on, there's power in that, right?
Yeah.
And then, money is the least of your problems once you find a good project.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that didn't make sense to me when you said it, because money was all of my problem. I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and I had no problem, just give me money, But of course, that meant something later on. Wasn't enough to pick up that at the time. But probably when we're young, some people say wise things to us, but we don't really pick it up later on. If we remember it, we go, oh, yeah. Like an old Italian told me once in my early days, an Italian developer, and we've become quite good friends. He said, you'll never go broke making a profit. And I thought, that's a stupid thing to say. Of course you wouldn't. But what he really meant was, sometimes you're better off just taking a profit when it's off, instead of holding out and maybe being a bit greedy and trying to push and shove and wait for something better. And it might not happen. It might not happen, or the market might turn, or different things can happen. That's what he meant by you'll never go broke making a profit.
Yeah.
And that sounded like a stupid thing for me at the time, but I came to realise that later.
Yeah. Do you think that the proximity thing with this guy sparked the mentor inside you as well, and made you want to start helping other people and paying it forward?
Yeah, well, that didn't happen because, I really had to get going. My second project was also what I call a creative strategy, because I did a second project with no money. So I ended up doing two projects. I hadn't spent 5 cents yet. But the second project was with my sister. I've got an older sister, Lorraine, and she had a boyfriend, Keith, at the time, who was an earth mover. So Keith had a few dollars. He was an earth mover. And he saw what I'd done with what I did with the project, even though it wasn't my brains that did it. And he said, oh, gee, you've done well out of that. Because I probably made enough money out of that project, having put no money in at all. The equivalent at the time, I could have probably bought a really nice big house cash. That's sort of money I made out of that, as an equivalent, at the time. He said, geez, you've done well at that. He said, look, I've got a bit of money. You reckon we can do a deal together? And I said, yeah, of course. No, I'll work that out on the run. Anyway, Keith became what I might call a money partner or equity, finance partner. You can call him whatever you like. But Keith financed that second project himself because he had some cash, he had good income off his earth moving business time. And so he financed the second project. Oh, I've done 2 projects, still got the bits in my pocket I haven't spent yet. And so, I was sort of away, really, but on my way.
Yeah. So creative strategies is something that you teach within your mastermind as well, isn't it?
It is, because it can get you into a project a lot quicker than if you're trying to save up the money to get into a project.
And with joint ventures, do you teach your students to find the deal first or find the money partner first?
Well, the old chicken and egg, isn't it? And look, I tried both when I've, in my early days. I've come to the conclusion that it's better to have some investors in tow and find the deal than it is to find the deal and have investors, unless you can get time. So time is the thing. For instance, if you found a deal, but you didn't have to settle for 12 months or 6 months, whatever, that gives you time to get the investors. So you can find a deal and then go and get the investors. But if a deal lands on the market today, it's just up for sale, how long have you got to go and get the investors? It could sell this afternoon, somebody who's actually got the money. So it's very hard to then go and find an investor, do an information memorandum, convince them that it's a good deal, and they might need to take their own advice, and then to get the documentation done, and then to get signed up, within the documentation, and to make some money available. That, no matter how fast you move, no matter how fast you are prepared, it takes time. Yeah. And so you could easily lose a good deal, because good deals don't sit around for very long. And so that's when I made up my mind, having lost some deals because I didn't have enough investors, or the investors, or I had investors who were like, yeah, we'll do a deal. And then when put to the test, they melt. Everyone suffered that fate. So I had to, after, win a deal, lose 2 sort of thing. There's got to be more, not so much hit and miss, that I started to realise, okay, I need to get my investors together on my deal. Because I wanted to do multiple deals. I didn't want to just do one, finish, take my profit, and then go and look for another deal. I wanted to, to get overlapping projects. So I knew to do that. One, I needed a number of investors, and you always need more investors than you're going to need, because when they're put to the test, someone will fold. But I also needed to know that they were genuine investors. So I needed a way of working that out. So I wanted a number of investors who were genuine and who would wait for me to find a deal, knowing that there's always a couple that are going to drop off. They might find another deal, they could lose their job, anything can happen. And so I went down that path so that I could do multiple deals at the same time. Yeah. And so that required a bit of a mind shift, a change in direction, doing different things to accumulate, if you like, a bank of investors. And then, of course, I had to find the deals as well. So there's always say there's a bottleneck in property development. In fact, I just got off the phone probably an hour ago with one of my mentoring students that I mentor, with this conversation about investors and having a bank of investors for deals. And so I found that was the best, because otherwise time's your friend or your enemy. If you find a great deal and you don't have investors, you better find some time. It could be that you use an option for a period of time. It could be that it's an extended settlement. It could be a deceased estate where they have to get paid. It could take 6 months. It could be lots of reasons. It could be somebody who wants to, get a contract on their house and they're moving into an apartment. The apartment's still built. They bought a flat. Know that there's a sale there in 6 months when they need it. But they're not ready to settle or move out of their house, do a double move rent. There's lots of reasons why people might want an extended settlement. It certainly suits us as developers. One, if we need investors to find them, but also it might give us an opportunity to advance our development permits as well, so that we can hit the ground running when we settle.
Yeah, cool. So when you did your first deal with Tony, and then was it your brother-in-law, did you say?
He's my sister's boyfriend.
Sister's boyfriend.
He never became my brother-in-law.
Did he not? So obviously Keith seen you do the first project, which gave him the confidence to then invest with you. But for
Sure.
any budding developers that are out there now that are wanting to do maybe a 1 into 2 or a 1 into 3 and dip the toe into property development, but they don't have that track record that you managed to get with Tony, what tips could you give anybody to create that bank of investors so when they do go out and find a deal, they, well, like you said, some of them do fall over, some of them do ghost you, but how can they pitch themselves to these investors in a way so that it gives the investors confidence that when they do find a deal, they're someone of their word and they're going to go through and follow through with the deal like they said they would?
Yeah. So first of all, the bigger the deal, the more money you need. That's not, that's pretty obvious. The more money you need, if you're just relying on one investor, the more wealthy the investor needs to be. So it could be, I'll just make the number up, small split of project, maybe sell one, put a house, whatever. You might need, let's say, $300,000 worth of equity to do that deal from beginning to end. I'm just making it up.
Yep.
Well, there's plenty of people out there that can put their hands on 300,000. It could be somebody with money in a super fund that's not going to be part of the project, but just lend you the money. That could be a loan, what I call a loan partner. That's okay. You can do that with self-managed super. It could be somebody with some money on deposit. It could be, and what most of the time is, it could be somebody on a credit. So lots of people can get their hands on 300,000. So if you're doing a small project where you need that, there's plenty of people out there that can do that. Also, because it's a small project, you don't have to prove you're the world's greatest developer. If it was a 6-story apartment block with a basement, they're different, totally different. And so bigger projects, more money, either wealthier investors, because there's a lot more people around that can get their hands on 300,000 than they can on $1 million. Or you might end up having to have more than one investor in a project, and that comes down to legalities and structures, and it can get a little bit more complex. But in terms of getting investors, I mean, and we teach a whole range of ways of doing that. We teach a range of structures that works with investors and finance, and it all has to come together. But also just something simple as investors. I mean, start close to home. If you've got a relative, if you've got a brother or a brother-in-law here we go, sister's boy, first one, and I shouldn't say, who could be interested in coming into a project with you. Because if an investor to come into a project, it's the old standard thing to do. It's know, like, and trust. And so sometimes you need a little bit of time to talk to somebody for them to get to know you. And then hopefully, if you look the right sort of person, they can get to like you, but then trust you. Because you won't get investors putting money into a project if they don't trust you. No matter what the percentage deal is, very few investors would put money into a project. They have got to look if they did not trust you. So, well, I can trust this guy. Sometimes it takes a little bit of somebody. Sometimes not so much time. And it depends on their level of sophistication. But something as simple as a little project, pretty easy to understand, pretty easy to explain. You don't need an investor with, bucket loads of money. 300 or 400 could be all you need. Plenty of them out there. And they're not really looking so much at your experience. They just need to know, like, and trust you, and they can see how it can happen. They can see the exit strategy. Okay, we've got to purchase it. We've got to get the approvals. Then we've got to build it, and then we're going to sell it. Okay, good. That's the process.
Yeah.
The bigger projects, more sophisticated investors, perhaps, then they might start to look at it differently. And I work with a small number of people all the time that we mentor, and
Three cash.
talking to investors, they can refer back to us because we're really advising them on projects, and that can stand in good stead for investors that are looking at somebody. They look at, but Bob and the team are behind them and advising them. Sort of $1.3 billion worth of development experience in 40 years, that can shore up that system a bit, and that happens, which is good.
Yeah.
I never had that when I started.
No. And it comes back to
He liked and trusted me because he grilled me like a lawyer for 30 minutes.
You mentioned there as well, you start close to home. Do you have any rules about investing with family members, or would you prefer to keep it outside of the family circles?
Yeah, look, and that's very much a personal thing. So it's a bit like the old glass half full, half empty thing.
Mm.
So my attitude on doing investments with, let's say, family members or close friends, let's just put them in the same category because you're going to see lots of them for the rest of your life, family and friends, probably. And so some people who are risk averse would agree, might say, I'm definitely not going to do anything with a family friend or in case something goes bad. And then they're like too close to me. I've got to look at them across the Christmas table when we're carving the turkey, and they're looking back at me. They're saying, you lost my 100 grand. And they don't want to be in that position. They say, much rather borrow off a stranger in case things go wrong. Well, that's sort of like the half empty thing, because now you're thinking about things going wrong. But look, if you can't live with that, then don't do it. Deal with a stranger. But other people take what we'll call it the glass half full sort of attitude. If I'm going to make money for somebody, because that's what we do, you don't have the right attitude when you're talking about when I'm talking about a joint venture, I'm typically talking about some other party who's going to supply that initial capital that I need to be able to go to a financier who's going to lend me the rest. He'll lend you most of it, but you have to put some money in yourself. So I'm not talking about a joint venture to keep it simple. I'm talking about the person that comes in, could be part of the deal, might be just a loan, but they're going to supply that amount of capital. And my attitude might be, well, if I'm going to make money for these people and myself, it would be better if it's a friend or a relative I'm making this money for. Like if an investor comes in and they're going to make 150 or 250,000 out of this project, how good would it be if it's my brother or my sister or somebody else, rather than just a stranger I don't know? So that's two different attitudes to the same thing. And really, you just got to be comfortable and go with what works for you, I think.
Yeah, that's some good advice there, Bob.
I've done joint ventures with my kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you got the ability to do a development and you can do it with your kids, you can set them up for life doing that.
Mm.
Whereas other parents who might want to set their kids up, they're restricted to having to take some of their capital, could be some of their savings, some of their super, and basically gift it to the kids so the kids can maybe buy their first house, or not that banks like doing this anymore, but going as guarantors of kids' loans and just tying up their own finances. I mean, for most people, if they really want to help their kids financially, they sort of got to diminish themselves to help the kids.
Yes.
But if you do a joint venture, which you can do with your own kids, you can set them up for life. And all you're using really is the profit out of the project for mostly their benefit to set. And so you're not diminishing yourself. You might forgo a lot or all of your profit in a project. So you're not winning, not losing. You come out of it financially neutral, but your kids can be the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
And they could get a $600,000 townhouse for 500 or 480, whatever the pure raw cost is. But you ask a kid to save up 100 or 120 grand deposit to pay retail or something, it'll never happen.
No.
They're always chasing it, Yeah. Whereas you can bingo, you could set 3 kids up if you got 3 out of a 3-pack of townhouses. If you're prepared to do it, not take the profit, let the profit flow through to them. There's structural things you have to do to make it work. Well, that's just a good structural accountant or lawyer.
Yeah.
I mean, how good's that? And you haven't diminished yourself. You haven't had to throw a chunk of your super at them, or, some capital, or tie yourself up on, on loans and everything, cross-collateralizing property with theirs.
Before you joint ventured with the children, did you sit down and grill them like Tony did to you?
They've got to be worthy. They've got to be worthy. No, seriously. And that's got a lot to do with your mum. You don't want them just to accept that that's the way it's going to be. And, like I did a 14 that project with my son Luke. It was a pure joint venture, 50-50. He's got a trust with a corporate trustee for his half. I've got one for my half. We came in and we did this project, but he did all the work. He did all the project management, the whole box, beginning to end, because he's capable. But that's part of it. He's not the sort of guy that feels like the world owes him anything. He spent his life preparing to work, and he's done well for himself, but it's always through effort and his brains and everything else. So like that, I'll be happy to do that. Unfortunately, make too many children with it, expect the world for their parents and give nothing back. Maybe you'd have to blackmail them, perhaps. Show me more respect. Pull your head in, behave yourself for 12 months, and maybe I'll let you come into a deal later. Yeah. Just joking.
Well, he's obviously had a good mentor as well, Bob, right? So that helps. Look, you've been through 6 property cycles, Bob, through your career. How does this property cycle feel compared to the others that you've been in post-COVID? Does it feel any different? Does it feel normal? Is there anything you expect to happen?
I never remember COVID. So I think I cut you off.
It's all good.
How do I think about the last property cycle coming out of COVID? Yeah, well, I haven't been through a pandemic before. That was something new. Yeah. I've been through lots of things. I've been through times when inflation was probably about 11.5%. Now it's pretty high. I've been through times when retail interest rates were capped at 13% at the banks, but basically with 17%. I've lived through extremely high interest rates. I've lived through times pre-deregulation of the banks in 87 where, it was regular and, credit squeezes where nobody would lend you any money. I've been through the GFC, the dot-com crash, the Asian meltdown, the share market crash of 1987, obviously the pandemic, all sorts of stuff, so I've seen it all. And there's different things to deal with at different times, and of course the bigger market, the macro market, unemployment, high interest rates, and sometimes you got too many things happening at the same time. As we did post-COVID, when we had rapidly rising building costs, and we just sort of trying to get over the back of that, and then we had interest rates going up incrementally for 12 months. So look, there's always stuff going on in the market. And really, I think it's about understanding the market, having an opinion on maybe where it's heading, but then dealing with those things that are more important than others. And I had the conversation with this morning. I've lived through times when it was extremely hard, say during the GFC, where the banks just deserted the market and you're just left with a handful of non-banks. That sector's grown enormously since then. And it was really hard to get money. I had a little 4-townhouse project I wanted to do. Nobody wanted to talk to me about money. I had a good credit rating and lots of experience. I ended up finding this funny little place. I could say their name, and I think it wouldn't be a secret they're out there. I think it was the Bundaberg Sugar Co-op or something, some funny little thing, in a funny little part of Bundaberg that looked after probably people that worked in the sugar industry. God only knows where this co-op came from. But they took me on to finance a 4-townhouse project. That was the first project. They never financed a project before. Right. Somebody introduced me to somebody from there and I had to talk to them. So it was I had this cooperative financing me on a 4-townhouse project. I couldn't talk anybody into doing me with. I actually held their hand through it because they never did the finance and development project before. So I'm sort of almost teaching them how to do it on the way through it, and I'm sort of using their money. But, and for those guys, they got me through that little project, I've been through a lot of things. But in terms of COVID, we're still suffering some of the effects out of the back end of it, but they're diminishing. So to me, I've seen, I haven't been through a pandemic. I'm not talking about the health side of things, or that can be very controversial. I'll keep out of that. But just purely on the financial thing, I've seen much worse times than what we went through in that period of time. Much worse. And then coming out of the back of it, we had the government trying to stimulate the economy. Of course, one of the best doing that is property, because there's so many tentacles property goes into, in terms of expenditure and trying to, make things happen. And they did what they did. I'm not saying whether it was good or bad, but what it really did, it really promoted house construction, but it didn't really do anything for things like townhouses or apartments because they were too long term and it was too shorter term. And so, coming off the back of that, we had a lot of building construction happening. There's a lot of incentives for first homeowners.
Free cash.
We've got the euphoria of people coming out of COVID that were told everyone's going to die, and then all of a sudden they didn't die. And then there was the FOMO, or fear of missing out. And all things were happening. It was pretty incredible to watch. And then we had the boom that we had, which was really created a lot by the
free cash.
And that sort of overshot itself. And whenever a market overheats, just expect there to be a correction. But if something goes up 70% and comes back 15, it still went up 55. Yeah. But of course, when it's correcting at 15, it's doomsday. The world's going to end, Previously, the world was going to end. Nobody cared that the good old-fashioned flu killed 500,000 a year anyway. Like, nobody, it's all scare, and then there, scare. No, it's just a bit of a correction. It's always going to happen. Let's look at the fundamentals. We're still undersupplied for things. It's an overheat. It's just finding its level again, and it did. Then pretty soon, those cities that went up the most, Sydney and Melbourne, the most, as you'd expect.
Free cash.
And then not long after that, hit the previous high again. About bill costs through the roof. I've never seen escalation in construction prices in such a short period of time. I thought I'd seen the record, but that beat the record. I've got to deal with all of that. And how do we deal with that? That's always the challenge during those times.
The challenge, right?
Through it. Lots of your viewers and Liz went through it. I went through it with a number of projects, and there's certain issues you've got to deal with. And as a developer, your ability to be a developer is often how you deal with a problem. In other words, you don't stick your head in the sand. And how you deal with, how you think about it, and like laterally, not just like concentrating on. I think a lot of successful property development can be around problem solving.
It's the job of a property developer, right?
There's always issues to deal with.
Yeah.
There's counsel. There's maybe a consultant that didn't perform the way you helped them. There's an escalation, maybe in a build. Let's get the contract right. It could be a problem with a builder. There's always stuff to do to sort it out.
Yeah. So, Bob, we've mentioned a few times now, you've been in the industry for a long time, and you've probably seen not just your fair share of things going on in the development space, but also the change in the housing landscape. And it's something that at the HMO Property Co are really passionate about. We used to have the quarter-acre block with the small 3x1 with the big back gardens, right? And then we sort of transitioned to building the biggest houses in the world at 246 square metres on average, on a 450 to 600 square metre block. So you've obviously seen that transition now. Are you seeing the landscape change over the last 5 years to a different style of housing, or to what people want being different? And where do you see it being in the next 5 and 10 years as well?
Well, crystal balling is, I don't know if it's my strong point, but it certainly has. I was brought up on the house on a quarter-acre block, whatever it is, 1,015 square metres, and it was a 2-bedroom with a sleep out, and the whole family lived there. So I saw that.
How many people live there?
3 kids and my 2 parents.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I was lucky to have my own bedroom, but my 2 sisters shared the whole time we lived there. But and then later on into property development, and I saw a lot of 650 metre lots with the house on it. I found an old ad recently of when I was selling these house and land packages on the Gold Coast. 3-bedroom house and land package, 600 metre lot, 59,950. That was like 1985, I think it was. Yes, it just goes to show you. But then you're right. There's these massive houses on small lots with almost built to boundary on one side, 1.5 metre backyard. and you know, 2 stories, rendered brick, the whole thing. You know, some of them were 500 meters. I don't even know how you do it, but and then and then we've seen that change where you often see a 500 meter lot advertised as a large lot. 500 meters large. Yeah, well, yeah, probably is. And then we went through that stage of 300 meter lots but then we've seen a lot more, things move towards the affordable end, and obviously you're big in that sort of space. What we used to often see is multifamily in the States, and nobody knew what the heck's that. Multifamily has been like for a long time in the States. Oh, what's that? Built to rent. That's another thing that's sort of come our way, and as well. So I've seen a lot more of that, and we've seen what you call HMOs over there, which on the East Coast we tend to call rooming houses. Different rules, different states, but how that work, and really a lot more emphasis on accommodation, and a variety of accommodation to suit a variety of circumstances and people's circumstances as well. And I see, and even without getting too much on the eco front, but a lot of technology going into houses. Where in my early days, technology may have been an electric garage door and a vacuum maid. We used to those into a hole in the wall. I mean, that was high tech. Everyone wanted a house with vacuum made in it. So like we've obviously come a long way, in terms of using technology, and the government has forced a lot of it into certifications in terms of housing. That's not a bad thing. We always whinge because now it's going to cost us another $3,000 to build a house, because we've got to conform with something. But yeah, like the bigger picture is that's probably not a bad thing. And so we've seen a lot more of that, and you're big in that space. And I know a lot of your listeners and readers are in there, or getting into that space, or already established in that space. And that's a great sort of market that happens on the side. So it's not all just about big houses on big blocks of land. When you go into the regional areas, they still like larger blocks.
Yeah.
They can't help themselves. They come off a farm, they want an 800 metre lot.
Yeah, big garage, big shed.
Yeah, shed in the backyard.
Yeah,
all that stuff. Big veranda all the way around, or half the way around. But really, the urban areas are really where it's all at, and better uses of infrastructure as well. And medium density is that, but a really good variety of product. My end is really outside of developments I do, which could be normal residential, industrial, whatever, is the retirement end, which is a different thing. But there's a lot of big accommodation requirement in that space as well. So, but look, where do I see it going? I just see it going more of where we're going now. I think functional housing, often smaller housing, but really high tech, and a variety of housing.
What are we classing as high tech, Bob? What sort of tech are you putting into the houses nowadays?
Oh, well, depends on what it is. I haven't done any student accommodation for a little while, but I used to do specific student accommodation. Well, they demand the highest, the best internet, the best of everything. But even something as simple as a charger for electric vehicles. I mean, we're either putting the provision in, or in some cases are actually putting in the full kit. Okay. In the days of do you put solar on the roof or not put solar on the roof? I mean, they sort of moved on from that sort of conversations down to electric cars, even retrofitting houses, I suppose, for that sort of thing. So we're putting that in. Or we do some high end stuff where obviously you'd put that in. Big 2-story properties, we hadn't put lifts into those because it is high end. But that'll work its way back even into middle of the market product as well. I mean, I just chose one particular little thing there.
Yeah.
But, high speed internet. I mean, there's lots of stuff, and lots of very friendly sort of things you can do. A lot of it, as I said, forced by the government or, councils or whatever, or state governments. But some of it just things that you want to put in there yourself.
Mm.
We're doing a retirement village at the moment where all the street lighting is solar, for instance.
Yeah, right. So they've got a solar panel on top of the light with a battery pack inside it.
Yeah. So it's not off the grid.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's one little thing we're doing. We're doing other things,
Yeah.
friendly, but
Do you mind talking about the retirement villages? When we spoke before the podcast, you said that you were doing them, and the way that you're doing them as well is really interesting.
Yeah, it's a market I got into about 30 years ago. Not to be confused with aged care. So what we call aged care, a lot of people get mixed up. They think it's the same thing, but aged care is administered under the Aged Care Act of 1997, which is a federal government act. So look, to keep it simple, it's people whose health is not necessarily great. So they're in a smaller accommodation. It could be a room or a suite, depending on how upmarket it is. There's medical staff on hand. Always a registered say nurse out there at any one time. Others, so it's very health related. It's very sort of less healthy people. Really want to keep it simple. Aged care, that's what it is. It's care for the aged and generally not high level of health. You go below that, and we've got what we call retirement villages, and they're usually often referred to as over 55s. A common model, without getting too technical on it, is what we call deferred management. So people would buy, could be a house, could be half a duplex, depending on how it's structured, but they buy a dwelling in a retirement village. There'll be some ongoing fees for maintenance and keep everything looking good. They'll pay a certain amount of money when they come in. There's about eight different structures. They could be a capital amount, a lease. There's all different ways of structuring that capital on the way in. But what's very common with them is not so much what you pay when you buy or while you live there. It's what happens at the other end when you leave, when you sell. And there's all different arrangements when you sell. And in some cases, it might be that half of the selling price goes back to the owner of the village, or 30%, or there's different modelling on that. So some people and some children of people who go into these things don't like what can happen at the end, where a big chunk of the asset sort of disappears back to the owner. And there's even things like refurbishment every so many years that has to be paid for and goes in the fund. So that's okay. I mean, lots of people live in retirement villages. But then there's other types. And while I have been involved in that regular over 55s type of retirement village, there's another model that's become really popular in recent times, but I first got involved in it probably 30 years ago. It's what often is referred to technically as a manufactured home estate, but these days you'll see them advertised as an over 50s lifestyle resort. So we're talking about a slightly younger cohort, over 50s lifestyle. That means, it must be lots of activities and things to do. They're a younger type of person, and sometimes called a land lease model. So that's the new buzzword, land lease. What's different about it is that the resident owns the building, but they don't own the land that it sits on. Okay. Which is it's sort of often the case with a retirement village, but a bit different. And they simply pay a fee every week, fortnight, whatever, to have their house on the land and to use the community facilities. It's a very simple model. The good news for them is when they sell down the track, they get 100% of their purchase price, 100% of capital gain, plus their money back. They don't have to share it with anybody. And all they really do on the way through is purchase a house at the beginning. The house, the building, not the land, the house, the building, technically a chattel. They buy the house and they sell the house at the end. And they do go up in value. They're different from normal real estate, because normal real estate has a land component. Even an apartment sort of has a land component, not much. Townhouses have a bit more land. Houses on a block of land have land, But they all have land and it's real property. On this, they own a building, a house. So that's what's different about it. And that's the model that I tend to steer towards. And it's good. It's good for the residents. in that they know exactly what they're getting into. There's no hidden fees. They know they get everything out the back end, including their executors if they don't, make it out into the next stage. But they're generally a younger cohort of people. We often have an area put aside for them to put their caravans mostly, because it's quite often these people, their average age is probably around 63, whereas the average age of somebody in a retirement village is 71, 72. The average age of somebody in aged care, I don't even know, it's probably 80 or more. They often travel, they might hook up the caravan for 3 months and head off north or south, depending on, where they live. They might go to a cooler climate in summer or a warmer climate in winter, and they're more active, so that's a model I like.
Yeah. So these are simple lock up and leave type. Are the villas small? What sort of square meterage are we talking?
Yeah, often single level.
Yep.
Often freestanding, although I have seen some models where they're duplexes, and they can be.
Yep.
I've seen some models where they're 2-story, but often with a stair climber or provision for a lift for later.
Yep.
Because we know the older people get, the less they like stairs. That's a fact of life. So 2 stories, you need to think about the future. Could be a provision for a retrofitted $40,000 lift later, or a wide enough staircase that you can put a stair climber on and, climb up. 2-story ones. Generally, though, single level, the ones I do tend to be a horizontal type arrangement where the lot sizes, although they're not titled, the lot sizes are certainly surveyed and fenced, typically sort of 250, 280 square metres with a low set house. 3-bedroom house would be a double garage, 150, 55 square metres. That's typical of the ones we do.
Yep.
There's some old models on small lots, smaller houses, not all that attractive. The modern ones are more attractive home, slightly bigger lot, bigger house. I mean, some of these more upmarket ones, the house, just the house alone could sell for over $1 million.
Mm.
Gone are the days when these are, they originated out of the back of caravan parks. We used to have little houses at the back of caravan parks. Permanent people lived there. They paid a weekly amount. And the caravan owner used to, rent out caravan sites or overnight vans. And that was another way of making money. That's where they started. But they've evolved and evolved over the years till now. The standard of housing is really right up there, like normal housing. And it's become a mature market, to the point that some of the big hitters out there, some of the big development companies sort of woke up 5, 6, 7 years ago about how good these are. And they've started either developing themselves or buying whole portfolios of other developers who'd built up a number of these things into a portfolio. Mm. And there's been big sales, 620 million when Halcyon was bought out. Some big hitters are in the market, but some small people are in there, like yours truly, doing it. But we develop to hold at the other end. Mm. That's what we do. We don't develop to sell. We get knocked down in a rush if we just wanted to sell. There'd be all sorts of super funds, even one of the ones I'm doing at the moment. As soon as we got a development permit, I was approached by a couple of big funds saying, hey, we'll buy it off the other end. We'll sign a contract now, if you like, to buy it off you, 4 years down the track. I was approached by a few people. That's how popular they are with the big hitters. Thanks very much, guys. I'll keep it in mind, but I really want to keep it myself. I know why you want to keep it. I want to keep it for the same reason,
So the returns are obviously attractive on these things as well.
Well, the returns are good, but there's not many developments that you can actually develop, keep the whole thing at the other end and have no debt. I mean, we're doing industrial developments, like, let's say, if I was to develop an industrial development and keep the product at the other end, it would owe me about 70% of what it's worth. And I could get a loan for 70% of the end value, commercial loan, and it'd probably be a bit cash flow positive because of the fact that, being a commercial industrial type project, the tenants pay the outgoings, you get a better yield than residential. But I still got a substantial debt. I got basically a 70% debt on it. I could do that with residential and keep them all, and I'd probably end up with an 80% debt at the end if I kept everything. Retail, shops, similar thing to industrial. Or I could do these, and at the other end I could keep it and have no debt.
How does that work?
It's complex. It might be a bit much to talk about it here. I'll
yeah.
tell you off air, but basically, there's good profit margins in it, and that enables you to rid yourself. It's probably a good term. Rid yourself of debt on the way through. I think that's something that ridding is a good word. Get rid of the debt. I mean, there's good debt and bad debt. I'm not talking about debt. I'm not saying debt's bad. Debt's wonderful. You know, the right debt. But here's an opportunity to rid yourself of debt out of a project by the time you get to the other end. And it's just the whole structure of the thing. It's the fact that it's like not real property. It's the fact that you can own a whole village at the other end. Because we'll call it a village that you own at the other end. It's just one title. It's just one block of land. It's just that there's a whole heap of roads and houses. And like I said before, because there's no land component, you have a lot because you have to know where to put the house. So it is surveyed, and there's a fence built around it, and there's roads for people to drive on, and there's services to make the toilet flush. And there's a lovely big community building that they can go to and have fun. And I'm doing one at the moment on a Greg Norman design golf course. So they get the golf, you know, and the garages, for instance, are 2.5 garages, or two and a third, really. 2 for the cars and 1 for the golf buggy.
I love it.
And in the current stage, we're giving away a free golf buggy with every purchase. You know.
Yeah, beauty.
Yeah, but it's different.
Yeah,
different type of thing.
And in development, Bob, speed is the key, right? The longer we hold projects and the longer it takes to build these projects, it saps away. The holding cost takes away the profit from the bottom line, right? How have you managed to sort of master that over the time?
Well, there's things we can control when we're doing a development, and there's things that are difficult to control that we can only control a little bit. And I'm talking about our best friend, the councils. And we buy a site with no development permit. We call that a raw site. Hey, we buy one, and we have to get a development permit so that we can sort of move forward. And that's usually it's usually a council thing. And so we've got to deal with councils, but we can't control them too much. Hey, they're a world of their own. And in some places and with some councils, that can take a long time. If we had to settle on our land and then go through this whole protracted council situation, it adds a lot of holding costs to our project. That's what I was saying before. If we can get a long settlement, like 6 or 12 months while we get our approvals, that's really going to help our bottom line. Or if we can get it built quicker than normal, because we know build times are blew out. And so if we could combine them with a quick approval, or perhaps even buying a site with an approval, and build as tight as we can, and then either keep or sell them as fast as we can, it's going to be great. It's going to really help our bottom line.
So how have you managed to speed up construction over the years then?
Well, lots of ways. Obviously, it depends on the builder. So here, current, as we're talking today, in March 2024, builders want 9 to 12 months to build a duplex. A lot of them, that's like, we're doing duplexes. We've got, students doing duplexes. That's what a lot of builders want, because they've gotten used to these long build times with, when they couldn't get supplies and couldn't get tradies, but they've hung on. Even though the cost escalation is pretty well leveled out, they're hanging on to these long build times. And I know it suits them to do that for the time being. But back in 2016, I was building a series of 5-story buildings, apartment blocks. And we used to do them every 9 months from a construction point of view. You just punch them out every 9 months, like in your sleep. Using builders. I'm not a builder. I never wanted to be a builder. I'm a developer, but that's what we used to do. Now they want that long or longer to build a duplex, which is a big house with a wall up the middle. Anyway, so give me the good old days when we used to build 5-story buildings in 9 months. But anyway, but with this, well, for instance, with this retirement village I'm doing on the golf course, it's important that we can build them fast. And so we've got 2 choices there. We can build them on site with permission from the council. We get a relaxation to build on site, or we can build them off site and then do the final work on site. That's the way we chose to go. So about 5 kilometres from the project, we have a large building, big shed. with a very good hard stand outside, or concrete. So it's a really good shed. We can build 3 houses at a time in there. That's a pretty big shed. And what we do is it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to build a lot of the house in the shed. Remember, 3 at a time. And then we move it to site in 2 or 3 pieces on a semi-trailer. And then once it's on site, we finish it. So finish it would mean putting up, there's a nice brick facade that goes on the front. Obviously, the concrete floor in the garage, the driveway, the fence, the landscaping, and connecting the services. That takes between 4 and 6 weeks on site. So basically, we can build a house 12, 14 to 16 weeks, depending. We can build a house, but we can do them 3 at a time. So we're in complete control of the quality. We can build a higher quality house in a factory environment, and no trouble getting trades. You think of anybody, say Sparky, they've got to drive to site early in the morning. They've got to unpack everything. They've got to do their work. Then they've got to pack up, and then they've got to go. And it could be like it was, 40 degrees plus, humid, or it could be freezing. Not very pleasant. What do here? They rock up to the factory. They can rock up at 7 or 6 or 5, and whatever. Their tools are there from yesterday. They do their work. They may not have to pack up and head off. They can work late. They can do whatever they like. They're contractors. They're subbies. They're on a job, and the more work they do, the more money they make. But because of the pleasant conditions, of course, they can do more hours with less stress. Anyway, it's a pretty good system. And we have a builder in our factory who operates all that construction side of it. Under his own license, he's an experienced builder. He's built a lot of off-site stuff for mining companies, so he's very experienced, got a great crew. And we can punch out houses, good quality houses, quite quickly. And so, as I said, we can build and deliver 2.5 houses a month out of the factory. That's 30 a year. That's sort of our sales rate.
Yeah.
It's one thing to sell 30, you have to build 30. We go out there and sell 30 houses, but if it's taking you 6 to 9 months to build one, like how many teams of people have you got to have there to try and punch that many out, 30 in a year? So that's the way we've solved that anyway.
Yeah, it's good. So you took it down from 9 to 10 month to 4 month.
Yeah, 4 months, but 3 at a time.
3 at a time, yeah.
Yeah, so that's three every whatever it is. 3, 30 a year. What's that? 30. Yeah, it's 2.5 a month, whatever way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
It's a house every I don't know, you can do the math, divide 30 days in a month by 2.5. I don't know, what do you got, 10, 12 or something, we're basically, punching that many houses out.
Yeah,
30 in 52 weeks, work that out.
You're just flowing out the factory one after another, basically, aren't they?
Yeah, so a house every week, 1.6 weeks or something, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Bob, there's so many questions that I haven't even asked you, and we've been chatting for just over an hour now. Let's quickly touch on the masterminds, because if people want to reach out and find out more about you becoming their mentor, what's the steps there and how do they find you?
Well, I'll keep that relatively short. We educate people on how to become property developers. So I started doing that a long time ago. It's part of the business that I absolutely love and get the most satisfaction out of. And yes, sure, we're developers, but that's a good thing. If we're developers, then we can obviously teach it, developing for a long time. So we have a course which consists of an online course, which have lifetime access, got everything, the A to Z of how to do property development, those creative sorts of things we talked about with joint ventures, it's all in there. That's a course. You work at your own pace. You can do that. And then we also have 2 workshops that you can physically attend. We have one around the middle of the year, which is all about joint ventures and creative strategies, goes for 2 days in a nice hotel. And then we've got another one at the end of the year, which is a workshop for everybody that can come to that. That's our course and our workshop. We have that. For some people who want even more than that, where they want their handheld, they want to be able to jump on a call to us. ask us questions, have us work with them on looking for deals, making sure they get the right one, which is pretty important, help them through a project. And we have a mentoring program. We only have a limited number of people in that, so it is by application. So really pretty simple. The world's best property development course, if I can sound like a salesman for a second. And the mentoring program, which is limited numbers, but really hand-holding. And, if you're absolutely really dead set serious about, property development as your future, probably the mentoring program, it'll get you there a lot quicker and a lot safer than any way you're ever going to get out there. Like me, sailing by the seat of my pants there, and probably being a lucky guy for a few years when I was starting off.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'll go back to the start of it. The experience that you've got, you need a mentor that's been there, done that, got the blood, sweat, tears, the battle scars to prove it. Bob, you've certainly got that over the years.
Yeah.
And then being part of that mastermind group as well. I'll go back to my other quote, proximity is power. When you're in a room full of other property developers, the network and the connections, and they say, it's a bit cliche, isn't it? Your network is your net worth, but it truly is, isn't it?
Good old saying. So propertymastermind.com.au, that's probably your first stop. Have a look at the website, have a bit of a read, and give us a call. We're happy to have a chat to anybody. But you're right. Yeah. It's a lonely life trying to do it by yourself. It's great if you're part of a community, great if you've got a mentor. It takes the risk out, makes it more enjoyable. We're human beings. We're not meant to do things in isolation, and we know the benefits of, as you just said, working and being involved in other things. That's why it's such a great thing, with your own organisation. I know I've had a good look at that as well, with your community, like-minded people learning off other people and yourselves, and then being able to take that next step into really putting it into action, and owning an investment at the other end that you've had an involvement in, that, like, all of that is where it's at. And I'm sure you derive a lot of satisfaction out of doing that, like I do. It's sort of very similar in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, I still have mentors now. Every year I engage a new mentor to take me through that 12 month and keep me on the straight and narrow. And I like to pay it forward to people as well, Bob, and support them the best I can. I don't have a mentorship course or anything like that, but hopefully we give enough value through the podcast and social media channels that it helps people to take the plunge into either investing or doing property development themselves. But we will drop all of your information in the podcast notes, Bob, so people can find you nice and easy. I want to thank you very much for your time, mate. It's been a pleasure catching up. Like I said, there was heaps of questions that I didn't get a chance to ask you, so I might reach out again in 6 months' time, or when you come to Perth, mate, we can do one in person.
Let's do that, because I'm going to come to Perth.
Beautiful. Look forward to it, Bob.
I'll be over there. As I mentioned previously, we're looking forward to. I love Perth. I love the cleanliness and the beauty of Perth and the Swan River, and it's a great place.
Beautiful. Bob, thank you very much for your time, mate. It's been a pleasure catching up.
Been an absolute pleasure myself.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you can stay up to date with all cash flow positive property updates.